All right, welcome to the Marriage Boss podcast. And on this particular Friday, I've got a special guest. I'm totally pumped up about this. I've got a friend of mine. His name is Joel Lewis, and he is the founder of Startup Dad Headquarters. And he's on a mission to help extraordinary fathers of today who are or want to be fully engaged in every aspect of their children's lives, and who are also trying to figure out how to pursue their own dreams of entrepreneurship in order to leave a legacy behind. Joel's vision at Startup Dad Headquarters is to inspire and enable one small business launch every single day by fathers all over the world. Joel, welcome to the Marriage Boss podcast.
Hey Rick, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. And it is a beautiful Friday over here. I know you're in the New York area. I'm in Massachusetts, and
Yep.
yeah, it's a beautiful day today. So I'm excited to be on the show, and then to get going with the day. It's kind of, I don't know, early still, 10:50, not too bad. So
Yeah, we're jumping on it pretty early. So
yeah.
we came together through a mutual friend who thought that our missions and our messages would match up nicely. We have since then had a couple conversations. I was blessed to be on your show last week, which is going to come out in July sometime. I can't wait for our audience to hear that. But today I'm totally pumped up because you and I are going to talk about something that all dads, really all parents, but certainly all dads need to learn more about, and that's balance. So
Yeah.
so let's jump right in, and I want to hear a little bit about how you got started. Let's get a little bit of your history.
Yeah, okay. So let's see how far back we go. So, let's not go too far back. So right now, I'm married. We have three young girls. So my wife and I have been married. Actually, June 30th is going to make 7 years. So been blessed to been to met her. We met ballroom dancing,
Wow.
surprisingly enough, and we have three young girls, a 6 year old, a 4 year old, and a 2 year old. So very close together, pretty much 2 years apart. And life is all sorts of crazy for us. So that's why I'm excited to talk about balance or balancing.
Yeah.
We're probably going to be, really talking more in that line in terms of balancing things. But my wife, like I said, we've met ballroom dancing. My wife is a NICU nurse. When we met, I was working at Intel Corp as a manager. We both were working night shift, right? So I was working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. 14 years with Intel. At the time, it was 7 years, and she was working 11 p.m. to
Oh,
11 a.m.
wow.
Now, it was rough, but because we were single, we had just met, we didn't have any kids. It actually worked out really well in terms of our schedule. If you think about it, when we met, we aligned our schedules. So working 12-hour shifts, I worked 3 days, then I was off for four,
Mm-hmm.
or I would work 4 days and then I'd be on for three. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it was like this every other week was kind of changing. But if you think about it, at max, at least I had 3 days off every week,
Yeah.
where most people only have 2 days off every week, right?
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday.
Yep.
And you really can't count Sunday because, like, Sunday you start to think about work again, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I had 3 days off or 4 days off, and my wife had the exact same schedule. So for a while, it was beautiful because we would basically, I would say goodbye to her at 6 p.m. On the days that I work or whatever, maybe a little earlier than that. Say goodbye to her. She would eventually go to work at 11, and then we'd both be home at like 8 o'clock. We'd go to sleep together like
Yeah.
a normal couple. Then we'd do that for the 3 days, and then we'd be off together for 4 days.
Wow.
So we could go anywhere. We could take these little trips. So we took the little trips to Maine. We took
Yeah.
little trips to New York. All that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So it
Yep.
was beautiful for quite some time. And then when we took a vacation week, so when we took the 3 or 4 days off, we actually had 10 days off.
Wow.
So so it was beautiful
You
for
were
a while.
spoiled. Yeah.
We were spoiled.
Yep.
And then 2008, we had our first child. So Anya came into the picture.
Yep.
Things weren't too bad. We were able to somehow maintain the schedule. We had friends and family that helped out and stuff like that. 2010, Lila came into the picture. So 2 years later,
Yep.
then things had to change, right? So my wife came off of nights. She went on to days.
Hmm.
It was now we turned into this situation where, those couples that we didn't want to do childcare. So it turned into a situation where um, I was working, she was off watching the kids.
Hmm.
Then she was working, I was off watching the kids. So
Yep.
we didn't really, it was two passing ships in the night, right?
Yeah.
And that was for quite a bit. And we were still fairly early into our relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, and then Sable came into the picture in 2012.
Yep.
So 8, 10, 12. And now life is just all sorts of
And as
craziness.
we know, that little girl rocked your world in many, many ways, and she
Yeah,
continues to.
that's right.
Yep.
So, so when the girls came, one of the things that and we're getting into the balance here, people, trust me.
Yep.
But one of the things that I loved about working with Intel is that they had this every 7 years you have a sabbatical.
Hmm.
So it worked out where when Anya was born in 2008, I was actually eligible for my first sabbatical with Intel.
Hmm.
So it worked out where my wife went on maternity leave, and then 2 weeks before her maternity leave ended, I started my sabbatical.
Wow.
Then we overlapped. We did a family trip for 2 weeks with the baby, and then she went off to work, and then I was with my daughter for the remaining 6 weeks or whatever. How many weeks? Yeah, 6 weeks of my sabbatical. So it was 8 weeks total.
Okay.
So I was with her. So I was able to actually care for her, take care of her, bottle her, everything,
Wow.
and it was amazing, and I loved it. And that kind of started me down this path of when I had to go back to work, I don't know. I don't think it was exactly like a mom having to go back to work, but it sucked. Like,
Yeah.
having to go back to work and not being able to see her. It got to a point where because I worked like I would work those 4 nights back to back,
Hmm.
I wouldn't really see her. And it got to a point where I would come home and she would cry, like,
Oh
cause
man.
like she didn't really know who I was.
Wow.
And I didn't like that, right? And I can't even imagine a dad who worked 5 days a week,
Yeah.
right, and only home on the weekends, because typically they're already in bed by the time you come home or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be.
Yeah. I mean, there are many of us don't even see our kids.
Right, right.
We leave before
So
they wake up, and we come home after they're asleep.
they're asleep, right? So I didn't like that, and that kind of started my mind to start shifting. Because prior to that, it was just climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
I grew up. It was 8 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we grew up tough. Not a lot of money. So my mind was always focused on climbing the ladder, making big money.
Yeah.
And then this got my thinking. And I had a friend of mine who is an entrepreneur, and I started looking into, like, what does he do? He speaks. He does workshops. He helps people. I was like, I can do all that because I'm a manager at Intel. And I speak, and I've done presentations. So I started looking and going down this path of trying to figure out what is it that I wanted to do, what is it that I wanted to create and build, what's my passions, all those things. You guys know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
And then I came across the 48 Days to Work You Love with Dan Miller, and that after making multiple attempts at other things, right? So
Yep.
I won't go down the
Yep.
all those things, but like I tried app development and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I came across the book 48 Days to the Work You Love, and that helped me shape what is now Startup Dad headquarters. And it really is a combination between exactly that pain that I was feeling where I wasn't able to spend, and now I have 3 girls, and being away, and I'm sure working night shift amplified it for me, but I'm sure it could amplify in the same way for a dad who's working a 9 to 5, and by the time he comes home at 6 p.m., the girls are, the kids are going to bed or they're
Yeah.
already in bed.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that. So Startup Dad came to be where it's a combination of wanting to be a father, wanting to be present in my children's lives, and at the same time wanting to create that freedom and leave a legacy behind. So that's how kind of Startup Dad came to be, and then
Well, tell us.
just
I want to just interrupt you to get the what was my favorite part, which is when you decided that you were going to leave the job. So let's just, you know, we know Startup Dad is here, but just take us back to the mindset, the decision, the communication, with Colleen and the whole thing. How did that happen?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great question. So a couple of things in there, and this is one of the things that I focus on big time with Startup Dad is, the why, right? Like, it all has. I love the fact that you brought up mindset because, like, I look at dads all the time, and you could see, I think Les Brown tends to quote this thing about like 85% of individuals are not happy with where they are, the job that they go to every day,
Yep.
and you can see people are not happy. You can see it. You can look at them in their eyes, and you can tell they're not happy. And I tell them, I'll tell people that what I do, and inspire and enable dads to basically leave their job and pursue their passion, create freedom, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a glossy thing, like really, like they what I mean, like it's like they're stuck. It's like they're stuck in this matrix, right? And so I always talk about like it has to start with your why, and that has to trigger there's this whole mental shift that has to happen first, right? That this is possible. Like prior, like just like with my situation at Intel, prior to this whole, you know, um, epiphany, if you will, being wanting to spend time with my daughter, I would have never thought about entrepreneurship. Like it would have never. I've heard about people who are entrepreneurs. Obviously, every company Intel was started by an entrepreneur,
Yep.
but I would have never thought about that. Like it wasn't even in my my mind shift. So it begins with that why, and then beginning that journey, and the journey begins before you actually even start building a website or anything. It's just like this journey happens in your mind of that this is possible. Like so for me,
The dream.
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
dream,
the
man.
dream, yeah.
The dream.
So for me, it started with the shift was with the kids, and then um, um, one of the things that I started doing is I started building startup. That once I realized, got clarity, validated, right, and that's a whole nother story, right? Very
Yep.
important.
Yep.
Validated that this is a need.
Yep.
This is something that people will. It's a pain point, and people will come to. I took, and it's very important is that you, as I'm going through this journey, I'm bringing my wife, Colleen, through it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think some wives will jump right in all the way with you. They'll listen to the podcast, they'll read the books, all that kind of stuff. Three kids. My wife doesn't have time to do all that, but I'm
Yep.
telling her, I'm explaining it to
Mm-hmm.
her, and I'm sharing what I'm seeing and what I want to do.
When you made the decision to leave your job and you talked to her about it, and how did that all, get to
Right, right,
fast
right.
forward to today?
Right. So I don't know how much of your audience know about like the Pat Flynn story. So my
Tell us what you want to tell us, because this is a very diverse audience,
got you.
and
Got
just make like nobody knows anything. Tell
you.
us everything.
Nice. So my situation came about. So I started building startup that headquarters, validated all that kind of stuff. And then in 2000 to this 2015, 2013, September 2013, we got, and it wasn't the best day that they could do it, but it was September 11th, right? So 9/11, right? So it was like September 11th of 2013,
Jeez.
they announced that our site was going to be closing down. Our Intel site, not Intel as the corporation,
Yep. Yep.
but the Intel site. It was the worst possible day that they could potentially pick in the entire year, but it is what it is. And they announced that they're going to be closing down. The fortunate thing is that they told us that it wouldn't be closing for another year,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we had time. Um, so my situation was like, okay, well, I already started building this thing. I think at this point, I think I already had launched. The website was up and all those kind of things. So this announcement just expedited everything for me, right? Where I know a lot of people say, and a lot of my guests on my show say, hey, you want to build it, start monetizing, start to build that, money coming in, and then once you feel confident that you could potentially replace your salary or 50% of your salary, then you take the leap.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have that perfect scenario. It was more like, okay, I already started building it. This time frame is coming, so now I've got to put some more things around this startup that headquarters, and then take the leap. The conversation with Colleen was like, all right, here's our options. I can stay with Intel, and we can move to the West Coast,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because most of the Intel sites are on the West Coast, or a lot of my coworkers were moving upstate New York to a town, it's in Malta, New
Yep.
York. There's a huge conglomerate kind of manufacturing company called Global Foundries, which is part of like AMD and those kind of things. Or you can move up there, sell the house, move up there. We had just bought this house, actually. There's a long story about that, but we bought this house and we literally moved into this house the same day Sable was born. So
Wow.
it's a whole crazy story in
That
terms
is
of
great,
balance
man.
and balancing. But we literally moved the same exact day. But this was our dream home. Everything that we want is right here. My wife's mom lives 30 minutes away. My parents live in New York City, which is about 2.5 hours away.
Hmm.
So it's just really great location to be in. So to move to the West Coast or to move upstate New York, we'd either way we'd have to sell the house. So the scenario was, okay, we either take one of these two options. And the reason why I'm saying we have to stay with Intel or move upstate New York is because the I didn't talk about my Intel journey, but by the time I left Intel, I was making pretty good money.
Hmm.
Enough that it's very difficult to replace it where I am. That's why
Yeah.
most of my coworkers moved upstate New York and stuff like
That's why
that.
people stay in jobs because it's hard to leave them.
Yeah,
If
what
they
they call
cut your
that.
pay every year, it'd be easy. In a few years, you'd be out of there.
Right. The golden handcuffs, right? Like
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
this the pay and the health insurance, right? That's
Yeah.
another big deal too.
Yep. And the security. Just
And the
just just
security, right.
up here, thinking that's real security.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And as you could clearly see, it's not because I was with this company for 14 years. Things are
Yeah.
going good, making all this money. We bought
Yeah.
our dream home.
Yep.
We bought the home based on the salary, correct? Because I'm
Sure.
at some point in the journey, Colleen cut back from working full time to working 24 hours a week,
Hmm.
right? So the money decreased there, but my money, my income went up. So we built everything around that, and then boom, this whole thing happened.
Yep.
So it wasn't a tough discussion because she'd been on the journey with me, and I laid out the picture. Right,
Hmm.
here's our options. We either move or we try to make this thing work,
Yep.
and that's kind of how we came around the decision of staying here, buckling down, and see if we could make startup dad work.
So talk about the resignation. Tell me what it was like when she said, "Okay, I'm with you," because that's even a scary moment when your wife agrees. Because now you got to do it. You can't say now you can't turn back. So tell us what it was like. Just take us back to that day when you decided that's it. I'm going in there today. And I'm going
Yeah,
to tell them.
yeah. So it was actually a little bit different because here's the scenario. It still was very crazy. It still was very crazy because so they announced that they're shutting down. I think initially they said we were going to be closing. So the announcement was September of 2013. They said we were going to be closing by December of 2014.
Okay.
So that was a little bit more than a year, right? And then they offered bonus options for people to, because that's very rare, right? For you to get a year's worth of
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
But there was still commitments. It's a major corporation, so they had commitments to customers. So what they did is they offered us incentives to stay, right? To stay. So it was like, okay, well, I know I have a year of time to start building this thing and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It ended up being more than just December. It ended up going into 2015. So it actually came into this year as well. And then once a couple weeks before they finally closed the doors, they actually said, hey, we still have more commitments to make. And they reached out to me and they asked me actually if I could stay even longer. Now, the tricky part about this is that mentally, this really, when my wife and I looked at it, it made sense financially. Okay, we're going to delay startup dad a little bit longer
Hmm.
because at this point now, I'm trying to be an awesome dad,
Yeah.
trying to be an awesome husband.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be still a good engaged employee, right? I don't want to burn any ships,
Yep.
right? And I'm a manager, so I have people that depend on me and stuff like that. And so I'm trying to build startup dad
Yeah.
headquarters at
Be an
this point
entrepreneur.
and be an entrepreneur. So I have these four things that are going on all at the same time. So very hectic. So we had already set in our minds that March 15th was going to be my last day,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was going to be the last day. That's the day they were going to close down. So it wasn't me necessarily giving my
Okay.
resignation. It was just, hey, the doors are closing March 15th.
So you had a good.
So
That was a good situation there.
right, right. So it was like everything was planned. We had everything planned. I signed up for a pretty expensive business course that I was taking.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be starting right around that March 15 timeframe. So then when they asked me to extend until April, I was like, oh man, I didn't really think about it like how it would impact our plans so much because we were looking at the dollar,
Yeah.
right? Because when we looked at it, it was like, well, if I stay until April, there's stock that comes into play, that become vested. There's bonuses that come into play. So there was all these extra financial benefits that came into play if I stayed longer.
Yeah.
So we said, well, that's going to just add to the runway. So let's do it.
Good.
So I said yes, to an extent. But then it kicked in afterwards. Like this really impacted all the plans that we had already made for Startup Dad.
Yeah.
Taking the podcast to 5 days a week, the business course that I had already enrolled in.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm still not only those four hats that I was talking about. Now I got this fifth one, which is this business course that I paid a lot of money for.
Yeah.
So it kind of threw things into a little tailspin there for a while. But it's it all had to happen, right?
Yeah. It sounds
And we
like it was a clearer path than a lot of us have.
right,
It sounds like you were patient and smart. So it's not like you just jumped up, got on top of a building and jumped off one day. So, and I think that this is good advice because a lot of us, certainly I would put myself in this category. I was the kind of guy who, like, as soon as day one I thought that thought, I had to leave. So I'm the original leap. I had the idea. The next morning I was done. So
yeah,
and my story is a little different than yours, but
yeah,
no job, no idea. My leap was completely,
right,
all
wow,
risk. So that was December 10th of 1997, and all the
wow,
people that know me, they know my story. But it's exciting to see a couple working together, and certainly it's beautiful when your wife supports you. So I think that's one of the things I want to point out. So now we know how you got to where you are. So let's talk about balance now. So before we hit the record button this morning, we talked a little bit about your day yesterday. And so we know certainly how we make a plan for the day and then it doesn't really turn out that way. So how do we get balance, now that you're fully invested and you're doing this business as your, it's more than a full-time job. It's your life now. It's a lifestyle,
right,
a passion-based business. So
right.
so talk about how you balance it out now so that some of the other dads out there and fathers and husbands can get a nugget or two from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, can I really make a point on
Sure.
what you just mentioned
Yeah.
in terms of that leap? I think what you mentioned was really key because I learned this after starting this process. Is you have people that say don't burn your ship, don't just take the leap.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have individuals like yourself who just took the leap, and I think it's very important for the dads or to realize whoever to realize which person you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes you might not know until you start that journey,
Yeah.
right? You learn so much while you're on that journey. And for me, even if Intel wasn't closing, I would have had to take that leap prior to taking Startup Dad to that next level because I am in one way like very much like you, where it's like I'm very black and white, and I need to listen. I'm going to be focusing on this. I'm going to go all in,
Yep.
right? I'm one of those guys. Hey, I'm going to get in shape. I'm just going to go all in,
Yeah.
right? And just like work out like a madman. And what held me back from doing that so much or just jumping full in was obviously the kids. But I realized I got to a point that I couldn't take the business any further working full
Yeah,
time.
it's
Like it
hard.
was like, yeah, I have to take this leap. So one of my guests that I had on the show, actually my very first guest on the show, Carrie Uberburner, he gave this picture about imagine your dream job, your dream scenario being a ship out in the sea, and you're on the shore, and you need to get to that ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could just jump into the sea and swim the entire length,
Yep.
right? Which
Yep.
is what you did.
Yep.
Or you could work on trying to bring that ship closer, closer,
Yep.
closer. And some people may need to bring the ship all the way to shore, depending on what kind of support you get from your wife or what have you. And then you could just kind of, walk on board.
Yep.
Or some people, like myself, I got it as close as I could. And then now I just gotta trust that my swimming capabilities could get me to the ship.
Yeah, and
And
I think
hopefully someone drops the line so I could climb up.
yeah, and we're all going to find out too when we take that leap. Just how much our intention is worth, how much our thoughts are, and the mindset we've developed, and some of us are going to have to rebuild from scratch once we take that leap. So,
Yeah.
but I think the freedom. I have a good friend who just took this leap a month ago, and I saw him this week, and he was just talking about how the freedom just felt so good. Obviously, the money issue is always there, but the freedom, he never experienced freedom like this. So,
Yeah.
and he's 53.
Wow.
So this is the first time he's ever felt this kind of
Wow.
freedom, and he's creative. So with that freedom is going to come a lot more creativity also. So we don't even know how much we can do until we are faced with the freedom and the highest requirement ever to make something happen out of nothing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Yeah. So for me, with to answer your question about the balance, first thing I realized, it took me a little bit, so now it's been a little bit over 2 months since the leap. So April 11th was officially my last day.
Yep.
We're now in June 26th.
Yep.
So one of the things I realized, and we were talking about it earlier, is there's a good and a bad, and you have to, I think you have to acknowledge it right away. And some of my mastermind groups that I'm in, I had to kind of explain this epiphany to some other folks who took the leap as well, because they were struggling with this. Is that you have that freedom, like you mentioned, but what happens is you end up saying yes to a lot of things that you would not have said yes. You would not have the ability to say yes to if you were working a full-time job.
100%.
So one of the things I realized was, when I had that set structure, the set schedule with Intel, I knew the days that I worked. I knew the time that I would be able to get in work for Startup Dad, like the time I could use to build it.
Yep.
And for the first 2 months after taking the leap, it felt like, man, I made more progress while I was working full-time than in these last 2 months. My first of all, my sleep schedule was all jacked up because working 14 years of night shift and then now trying to get to a regular routine.
Yeah.
Forget about it. It was all completely messed up.
Yep.
And then so I was either up late at night, or sleeping in through the day. It was like all sorts of craziness. And then, you and I talked multiple times, and that one of the things that I didn't talk about yet is my daughters have, especially the 2-year-old, has some medical issues that we're dealing with.
Yep.
So when I was working at Intel, and I guess this is part of the beautiful and the positive side of the freedom, is that I'm able to go to these doctor's appointments, whereas
Yeah.
before I would miss some of these doctor's appointments. So the balance, in terms of the balancing part of things, is that you have to quickly learn what are the things you're going to say. For everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else.
Okay.
Right? So a good example is yesterday. I went to, we had a doctor's appointment. The specialist that we see for my daughter's condition is in Boston. And that's about 45, 50 minutes away. So it's 5 of us, we all have to wake up early to get out there. I think the appointment was for 8:30 in the morning, which means we're waking up somewhere around like 5 o'clock.
Yep.
To get out there. So now I'm waking up 3 young kids at 5 o'clock in the morning, try to eat something. We end up eating something on the go, get out there. So in my mind, this whole time, I'm obviously, what I like to think about is more balancing over balance.
Okay.
Because you could stress yourself out trying to balance, but I think balance happens over time, right? And a good friend of mine made me realize this. Balance happens over time. Balancing is something that happens every day.
So there's an action involved in balancing that is just an ongoing attempt to be in
Right.
a balancing mode, but not
Right.
to try to achieve full balance. It's just to keep balancing. So that's the
Right.
action. That's a good
Exactly. A
nugget
good
right there.
a good picture that a friend of mine shared with me was like the Karate Kid movie where he's standing on top of the little piece of wood there and he's
Yeah.
trying to balance.
Yep.
And at the end of the movie or towards the end of the movie, you see him up there and he's doing the crane pose and he looks very balanced. The wind is blowing, the
Yeah.
water's hitting the rocks,
Yep.
and he looks very balanced. But if you actually was to zoom in to like where his ankles, his toes, you would see all this twitching,
Yeah.
like very micro twitching, and that's what life is. I think it's like you're the wind blows this way, so you're putting
Yeah.
more pressure that way,
Making
right?
adjustments.
Making adjustments, right? So as we're driving out to Boston, my mind is obviously clearly, I'm trying to stay really focused on the scenario at hand, right? My daughter, what's going to happen, the questions that I have for the specialist, because they want to do this next level surgery, where she's not going to have a colostomy bag. So it's a GI issue. She's not going to have a bag, but it's going to be like they call it a Mickey button, which will allow us to flush her colon to keep it clean and all that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
my mind is focusing on that. But at the same time, it's like, I know, okay, after we deal with all this, hopefully I could get home and start working, right? Because I still have to work. It's a Thursday. Normally this would be a work day.
Yeah.
But I said yes to going to the doctor's appointment, right? Which makes sense. Coming back from the doctor's appointment lasts until 11 o'clock in the morning. We're coming back home now. My wife's cell phone completely dies, her iPhone.
Naturally.
It was already acting up.
Yep.
My phone was already cracked. We were already talking about switching providers because maybe I shouldn't say the name of the company, but the company we were with was very. I don't want to get you in trouble, man.
I ain't getting in trouble, man. Nobody owns me, Joel. You know that, man. The Marriage Boss is a brand unto itself.
That's
We
all
are
right.
beholden to no one. We're free.
The provider we were with is just like it was just too expensive because we have my mother-in-law and my mom on our plan, so we have four of us,
Okay.
and it was just too expensive. It was like, why is this so expensive? And of course, now being an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and now you start looking at these bills, it's
Yep.
like, why is this thing so high? So we decided to pop into one of the other companies, and we were looking at one, and then my wife was like, "Well, my friend told me about this one," so we went into it, and 4 hours later, we go through the whole process of transferring all the four phones, negotiating. We got a great deal. I can't lie. We got an amazing deal.
Good.
But 4 hours later, we end up walking out with the phones. So now it's like my whole day is gone now at this
Time
point.
to make some adjustments.
Right, yeah, and my wife and I already had plans to do a date night because after this past week, my 2-year-old was admitted to the hospital from Tuesday to like Monday, so almost an entire week. So and my wife was there, so it was like, okay, I got to do something. We got to do a date night. We got to get out of the house. We got to spend some time together because it's just been a crazy hectic past couple of days. So we already had a date night. We already had the nanny, and you know how difficult it is to lock down the
Yeah.
nanny.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not going to cancel this. The night, so I woke up at 5 a.m., but I didn't mention that I went to bed at 3 a.m. So, right,
Yeah.
doing stuff for Start of Dad.
Yeah.
I went to bed at 3 a.m., woke up at 5 a.m.
Man, yes. All right.
So now I know I got this date night coming. My wife was going to take because my mother-in-law came with us to the doctor's appointment, so my wife was going to take her back home. So I was like, okay, I got to sneak in a nap so that I could be awake for our date night.
Yep.
So I snuck in a nap. We went on the date, and we got back home. We saw the latest movie possible. We got back home at like 1 a.m., and I got no work done, right? No work done on a Thursday for Start of That headquarters.
Yep.
So now it's trying to figure out where I'm going to get all that, make up for it. And but all those things I mentioned were important. Minus probably the cell phone, right? Probably the cell phone we could have, like you talked before we
You
hit
know what?
launch.
With
Maybe you
three-
could have waited until the weekend.
But with three kids, though, and with you guys doing what you're doing, that cell phone is like, that's command central. You got to
Right, for my wife,
communicate.
yeah.
You got to be, when you have not only just a husband and wife, but a mom and a dad. And then if you have some health issues in there, you guys got to have connection. So
Yeah,
I get it,
absolutely.
and I think that like you gave us some great tips on how to balance. I love some of the stuff that you are saying and doing, but certainly I think that your brand. I want to make sure that our audience and past our own audience finds out more about what you're doing, and so tell us how we can find you and find out more about what you're doing and embrace your message.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for that. And so Startup Dad headquarters, it's startupdadhq.com,
Okay.
right? That's where you could find pretty much everything, my social media, everything like that. But on social media, everything is Startup Dad HQ. I probably keep it short as possible.
Okay.
And the podcast is the full name, Startup Dad Headquarters. If you search in iTunes or Stitcher or anything like that. But
Cool.
yeah, that's where you can find me.
Hey, listen, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for your friendship and the collaboration that we've already experienced together. I'm excited to have met a guy like you and a high quality man, a high quality husband and father, and certainly a high quality entrepreneur. So, Joel, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Good luck to you. And listen, people, jump out there to startupdadhq.com and check out his podcast, Startup Dad Headquarters, on iTunes.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right.